It was supposed to be a regular Wednesday night, one of those nights that pass without any special memory attached to them. I'd just gotten home from work later than usual, which probably saved me from hearing my mother-in-law complain about how men never do enough around the house. She'd been staying with us for a few days, supposedly because she'd sprained her ankle. Although, to be honest, I was beginning to wonder if she'd done it on purpose. Her presence brought an odd tension, a strange kind of buzzing energy into our home. But that night, I noticed something off as soon as I pulled up in front of our house. The curtains in the living room were closed, which never happened, not at this time. Emma loved those floor-to-ceiling windows we installed last year and always kept the curtains wide open. She said they made the house feel alive. But that evening, the living room was dark, the curtains shut, like the house was trying to hide something. The whole vibe was off. I got out of the car, closed the door gently, and just stood there for a second, staring at the closed windows. For a second, I felt like a stranger at my own home. A weird sense of unease crept up, a prickling feeling in the back of my neck. It's the kind of feeling you usually brush off as ridiculous, but this time, I couldn't shake it. As I stepped inside, the air felt different, almost stale, as if the place hadn't been lived in. And that was the first thing I noticed, not a single sound. No Emma, no kids, no mother-in-law filling the house with her high-pitched opinions. I stood in the hallway, listening to the silence. A faint scent hung in the air, something floral and faintly familiar, but not quite Emma's usual perfume. I moved through the house, room by room, calling out for Emma, for the kids, even for her mom. I was about to head upstairs when I noticed it, a thin, black jacket draped over the armrest of the living room couch. It was definitely not mine, and it was far too masculine for Emma or her mother. I stared at that jacket for what felt like an eternity, my mind processing the fact that someone else had been in my house. It wasn't just a gut feeling or a suspicious thought. There it was, right in front of me, a stranger's jacket tossed casually on my couch, like it belonged there. Everything in me resisted what that implied. I walked up to it, my fingers hovering over the collar. My brain raced, reaching for any logical explanation. I didn't recognize the brand, but it was well-made, expensive. I hadn't seen it before, and Emma wouldn't wear it, not her style at all. My fingers brushed over a stray hair on the fabric, short and dark. Whoever owned this jacket didn't live here, and they definitely hadn't just stopped by for a cup of coffee. I felt my stomach twist. Maybe Emma had invited a friend over, someone I didn't know. Maybe one of her work clients stopped by for some reason, and she just forgot to mention it. But I knew she would have told me. She told me everything, or at least, I thought she did. I took a deep breath, letting the silence settle around me. I scanned the room. The remote control was on the couch, and an empty glass sat on the coffee table, a slight smear of lipstick on its edge. Emma's lipstick, her usual shade. The rest of the room looked untouched, everything was in its place, neat and clean as always. But that jacket. It just didn't fit here. I forced myself to stop standing there like an idiot. I needed to check the rest of the house, to get answers, not stand there guessing. Moving as quietly as possible, I headed down the hallway and into the kitchen. The counters were spotless, but the lingering scent in the air was still there, floral and faintly powdery, not a fragrance I could place. That was the moment I heard footsteps upstairs, just one soft thud, the kind that might happen if someone were trying to move quietly but missed a step. My stomach tightened, and I strained to listen. Nothing. Just the silence pressing down on me again, thick and strange. I considered my options. My kids were at a friend's house for the night, they were safe. But Emma, she was supposed to be here. And her mother. I'd walked into what felt like someone else's home, and it didn't make sense. I wanted answers. So, I went upstairs. Slowly, I took each step, careful not to make a sound, watching the shadows from the landing above. The door to our bedroom was open just a crack, and the faint glow of a light spilled out. As I reached the landing, the smell hit me again, stronger this time, drifting from the direction of the bedroom. I hesitated. My heart pounded, louder than the footsteps I thought I'd heard. I stood in the doorway for a second, unsure of what I'd find. I pushed the door open slowly, my gaze falling on the neatly made bed, the bedside lamp casting a soft glow over the room. Nothing out of place, nothing that looked off. And then I saw it, another piece of clothing, tossed on the edge of the bed. A man's t-shirt, dark and simple, but definitely not mine. Next to it, Emma's favorite robe lay crumpled on the floor, like it had been slipped off in a hurry. The ground beneath me felt like it was disappearing. My wife, who was supposed to be here, the woman I trusted with my whole life, had left these clues scattered around like some messed up breadcrumb trail. I didn't want to believe it, but here it was. I reached down, picked up the t-shirt, holding it in front of me like it might offer up some excuse, some logical explanation. But it didn't. It was just a piece of fabric, left behind by someone I didn't know, in my own bedroom. And I realized that whoever had been here wasn't gone for long. There was something about the way it all looked, the jacket, the t-shirt, the lipstick-smudged glass. It all felt recent. Like I'd missed them by minutes. I didn't know what to do, what to think. All the anger, the confusion, the hurt, it all hit me at once. I wanted to tear through the house, to search every inch until I knew exactly what had happened. But that wouldn't fix this. That wouldn't change what I was seeing right in front of me. I went back downstairs, my hands clenched into fists. I grabbed my keys off the counter and went out the front door, not bothering to lock it behind me. I needed air. I needed to get out of there before I did something I'd regret. I got in the car, started the engine, and just sat there, gripping the wheel. The street was empty, the night quiet except for the hum of the engine. I couldn't shake the image of that jacket on my couch, the t-shirt on the bed. I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shattered, that the life I thought I had was slipping through my fingers. My mind raced through every conversation Emma and I had had in the past few months, every time she'd gone out late, every unexplained work trip. I'd shrugged it all off, too wrapped up in work and the kids and the day-to-day grind to question anything. But now it felt like every detail I'd ignored was a piece of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. I forced myself to think. I couldn't just drive around in circles all night. I needed answers, even if I didn't want them. I needed to know who this guy was, how long this had been going on, and why she'd done this to us. To me. My first instinct was to call her, demand she explain herself. But I knew she'd dodge, give me some half-baked excuse, try to weasel out of it. She was good with words, she always had been. No, I needed proof. I needed to know for sure, to see with my own eyes what she'd been hiding from me. Then, and only then, would I confront her. And I'd make damn sure she couldn't lie her way out of it. I took a deep breath, calming myself down. I didn't need her answers. I could get my own. I knew a guy, an old friend who worked as a private investigator. We'd lost touch over the years, but I knew he was good at what he did. And I needed someone who knew how to find the truth without tipping her off. I made the call. The phone rang twice before he picked up, his voice groggy. "Who is this?" he mumbled, obviously woken up by my call. "Tom, it's Sam." Silence on the other end. "Sam? It's been years. What's going on, man?" I hesitated, but there was no way to dress it up. "Tom, I need your help. My wife. I think she's seeing someone." Another pause. Tom sighed, and I could hear him shift around, probably sitting up in bed. "All right, I'm awake now." "Where are you?" "In my car." "I don't know what I'm supposed to do right now." "First, you calm down," he said. "Where's Emma?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I just found some things, a guy's jacket, a t-shirt on the bed, the whole damn setup, Tom. I can't believe this is happening." "All right, here's what we'll do. You stay cool, and I'll get my equipment together. I'll head over to your place and check things out." I gave him the address and hung up, feeling more grounded just knowing Tom was on his way. Tom used to be a police detective before he got out of law enforcement. Last I heard, he had his own PI firm, small but enough to keep him busy with a steady stream of cheating spouses, shady business deals, and the usual stuff people didn't want out in the open. We'd been close in college, even roommates for a couple of years before he moved out. But life happened, and we drifted. This was the first time we'd spoken in at least 5 years. As I waited, I couldn't shake the growing rage that bubbled under my skin. I'd never felt that kind of anger, like something that had been dormant was coming alive. My mind kept circling back to the image of that t-shirt on my bed and the lipstick-stained glass, making me sick. It was one thing to imagine betrayal and another to see physical evidence of it, right there in the middle of your own life. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and tried to let my thoughts drift somewhere else. But it was no use. My phone buzzed, and I looked down to see Tom's text, almost there. Park around the corner. 5 minutes later, I saw his old black sedan pull up a couple of houses down. I got out of the car and walked over. Tom stepped out, wearing a jacket and carrying a small black bag that looked a little too official for what I thought this meeting would be. We didn't bother with small talk. "Show me what you found," he said, nodding toward the house. Together, we walked up the driveway and into the house. The second he stepped inside, he did a quick scan of the room, taking everything in with a cool, methodical gaze that reminded me of the old Tom, sharp and detached, just watching for details. He spotted the jacket immediately and picked it up, examining it closely, turning it over, feeling it. He reached into the pockets but found them empty. After a moment, he nodded, setting it down carefully. "Upstairs?" he asked. "Yeah." I led him up to the bedroom. The t-shirt was still there, crumpled on the bed as I'd left it. Tom stared at it, frowning slightly. "This doesn't look like a simple one-night thing," he said, his voice low. "A guy leaves his jacket downstairs, a t-shirt here. That's someone who feels comfortable enough to treat this like his own space." I swallowed, feeling a sick sense of confirmation wash over me. "Let's keep this between us for now," he continued. "You don't want her getting wind of it. If she's cheating, we'll need to watch her, get evidence, and then you can figure out how to move forward." Tom walked around the room, scanning for anything else that might stand out. After a few minutes, he nodded. "We'll keep it quiet, stay in the background, let her think everything's fine. Give me a couple of days, and I'll set up what we need to catch her in the act, wherever she's meeting this guy. I'll get some cameras installed around the house, especially near your bedroom, your front door, maybe her car." The idea of cameras in my house felt invasive, but I understood the necessity. I needed proof, something undeniable. The next morning, Emma got home. She slipped through the front door quietly, carrying a bag of groceries like it was any other Saturday morning. She glanced up and smiled as she saw me, looking the same as she always did, casual and calm. But there was a flicker in her eyes that I'd never noticed before, a quick flash of discomfort. "Where were you?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Oh, just running some errands," she said, brushing it off. "I realized last night that we were out of milk and a few other things, so I thought I'd grab them early." She held up the bag like it was some kind of proof. "Milk? You were gone for a while." She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Yeah, I went to a few different stores. You know how it is. Prices keep going up, so I like to compare." "Right." I nodded slowly. I could feel my hands clenching at my sides, but I kept my voice calm. "Well, glad you got what you needed." I walked past her and went to the kitchen, needing some space. She followed, putting the groceries away. I watched her from the corner of my eye, searching her face for any sign of guilt, but she was skilled at keeping her expression neutral. She'd had practice. The thought made me feel sick. For the next 2 days, I played my part, keeping up the routine as if nothing had changed. But I couldn't help watching her more closely, noticing the little details that had once seemed so innocent, the way she kept her phone close, glancing at it frequently, the quick text she'd send, her sudden excuses to go out. Each one was like a fresh slap in the face, little betrayals adding up. Tom checked in with me daily, updating me on his progress. He'd set up a small camera near the front door and another one facing the driveway. He also installed one in the living room, concealed in the corner of a picture frame, and another in the bedroom, cleverly hidden in the smoke detector. It felt strange knowing there were cameras watching us, watching her. But this was my only way of knowing the truth, of proving it beyond doubt. On the fourth day, Tom called me around noon. "I just got the footage from this morning," he said, his voice tense. "You might want to come down to my office to see it." The drive to his office felt endless. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, as I replayed everything in my mind. The idea that I was about to see something concrete, something undeniable, filled me with a strange mix of dread and relief. I needed the truth, but I knew that once I saw it, I could never go back. Tom was waiting for me, already set up. He didn't say anything, just gestured for me to take a seat next to him. He pressed play, and the screen came to life. It was footage from the camera at the front door. The timestamp showed that it was taken around 9 in the morning, about an hour before she'd returned home. The door opened, and Emma stepped out, her hair pulled back, looking freshly showered and dressed casually. She glanced around quickly, then walked briskly toward the driveway. A minute later, a black car pulled up, one I didn't recognize. A man stepped out, tall, dark hair, well-dressed. He smiled at her, and she smiled back, a familiar look of warmth and affection in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. I felt something in me crack, a cold numbness spreading through my chest as I watched her laugh, lean in close, place a hand on his arm. She looked so comfortable with him, so natural, like they'd done this 100 times before. She climbed into his car, and they drove off together, leaving me staring at the screen, at the empty space they'd left behind. "That's not all," Tom said quietly, pressing another button on the remote. The footage switched to the bedroom, where another clip started playing. It was the two of them, entering the room together, laughing as they closed the door behind them. She tossed her purse onto the dresser, kicked off her shoes, and kissed him. I watched, feeling a hollow rage eat away at me, as they made themselves comfortable on my bed, the bed we'd shared for years. I forced myself to keep watching, even though every second felt like a fresh wound. There was no way to unsee it, no way to pretend it hadn't happened. She'd betrayed me, not with some fling, but with someone she'd obviously known well enough to bring into our home, into our bedroom, into the life we'd built together. When the footage finally ended, I sat there in silence, feeling like my insides had been scraped out, leaving nothing but emptiness. "What do you want to do, Sam?" Tom asked, his voice low. I stared at the screen, the image burned into my mind. The man she'd chosen over me, her casual, easy betrayal. And in that moment, I felt a new resolve settle over me, cold and solid. "I want her to know I know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "And I want her to feel every ounce of the pain she's caused." The drive home was different this time, sharper somehow, like each turn was leading me back into enemy territory. I was past the shock now. I had the evidence, undeniable and brutal, all laid out before me in that video. There was no way for her to explain it away, no chance of some twist that made everything innocent. It was simple, really. She had cheated, she'd brought the guy into our house, and now I was about to shatter whatever illusion she'd been living in. Tom had sent me a few more clips to my phone as I was leaving his office. I'd only watched a few seconds of one before stopping it. Her laugh echoing through my own bedroom had been enough. It was going to take everything I had not to explode when I saw her. But I wasn't just going to confront her. No, I wanted to hit her where it hurt, as hard as possible. She deserved to feel the consequences of her choices. My first stop was the bank. Emma had no idea I'd opened a second checking account in my name only, a move I'd made quietly a few months back for personal savings I planned to put toward a surprise anniversary trip. How ironic that now I was here, transferring every dollar from our joint account into my personal one. I figured she could consider it partial payment for her new life. I left just enough to cover the bills that were pending, but not a cent more. I wanted her to see an empty account when she finally logged in, to feel the drop in her stomach the same way she'd gutted me. Next, I stopped by a lawyer's office. I didn't know the guy personally, but he'd been highly recommended for situations like mine, where no reconciliation was possible. Sitting in his office, laying out the details with the evidence I had, it all felt strangely detached. Like I was just watching myself go through the motions. But the lawyer was all business. He gave me the rundown, how with proof of infidelity, I'd likely have a solid case for full custody and control of our assets, at least temporarily. As we wrapped up, he handed me a stack of papers to serve her, the first steps of filing for divorce. With that out of the way, I drove home, feeling a sense of purpose settling over me. This was going to be the day she would never forget. She'd left a trail of carelessness, and I was going to use every bit of it against her. I pulled into the driveway, shut off the car, and took a deep breath before heading inside. The house was quiet, just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock in the living room. It was still early afternoon, so she'd likely be out running errands, which was fine. It gave me time to get things in place. I grabbed the divorce papers, laid them neatly on the dining table, and set my phone next to them, with the video paused and ready to play. I went around the house, gathering anything that was strictly mine, boxing up whatever little things I didn't want her or her friend to touch. Then I grabbed a spare suitcase from the closet, loading it with a few clothes, my passport, and anything else I'd need for a few days away. I wasn't planning to stay here tonight, not after everything I'd seen. By the time I heard her car pull into the driveway, I was seated on the living room couch, facing the front door with the divorce papers and my phone laid out in front of me like a trap she was walking right into. The door opened, and she stepped in, her face lighting up with a cheerful hey, when she saw me, like she wasn't hiding a thing. She even gave a small wave, setting her purse on the side table and kicking off her shoes before walking over. I didn't say a word. Just watched her every move, studying her the way you'd study a criminal at the scene of their own crime. After a moment, she seemed to notice my expression and paused, her smile fading. "Sam? Is everything all right?" I gestured to the dining table, the divorce papers sitting there in plain sight. "What's this?" she asked, her face twisting with confusion as she walked over. She reached for the stack, her eyes scanning the top sheet, and I watched the moment it clicked for her. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, her eyes darting back up to meet mine. "Divorce papers," I said evenly. "I figured it'd be easier if I had them ready for you." She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. What is this?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "Sam, I don't understand." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow, gesturing to the phone next to the papers. "Then maybe this will help." I picked it up, tapped the screen, and the video started playing, her and her lover laughing in our bedroom, crossing the line between the woman I thought she was and the woman she'd hidden from me. She went white as a sheet, her mouth hanging open, eyes fixed on the screen as the seconds ticked by. Her hand flew to her mouth, her body tense, as though she could somehow stop the flow of evidence pouring out in front of her. "Sam, please," she started, her voice choked. I can explain." I stopped the video, meeting her gaze. "Explain what, exactly? The part where you bring a stranger into our house? Or the part where you throw away 12 years of marriage for some guy who doesn't even bother to leave his jacket behind?" She looked away, guilt written all over her face, a tear slipping down her cheek. It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" I felt a bitter laugh escape my throat. "What is it, then? A business meeting? A charity fundraiser?" She shook her head, a pleading look in her eyes. "Sam, I made a mistake. I wasn't thinking straight. It was stupid, I know. But it doesn't mean anything, I swear." "Oh, it means something," I said coldly, standing up. "It means that you thought so little of me, of our kids, that you were willing to bring this guy here, to make our life a lie. You made a choice, Emma. And this is where it leads." Her face crumpled, and she tried to reach out to me, her fingers trembling. "Please, Sam, don't do this, it's over, I swear. I'll never see him again. I'll do anything to make this right." But I was beyond bargaining. She'd had every chance to be honest, to walk away before she dragged me into this mess. And now she was scrambling, desperate to salvage what little was left of her pride. "You already made your choice," I said firmly. "I'm just following through with mine." She dropped her hand, staring at me in silence. I could see the weight of what she'd done settling in, reality hitting her harder with each passing second. She opened her mouth, her voice a fragile whisper. "What about the kids? What are we going to tell them?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. We'll tell them that you made a choice, one that broke up our family. We'll figure out custody arrangements, but they're not staying here. Not with you." Her eyes went wide, panic flashing across her face. "You can't take them from me, Sam. They're my children too." "Really? Because you didn't think of them once, did you? You didn't think of what this would do to them." I grabbed the papers from the table, tossing them in front of her. "Sign these. It's over, Emma." She looked at the papers, her shoulders sagging, her expression a mix of desperation and anger. "I know I messed up, but you don't have to do this. Please, Sam, let's talk about this. For the kids' sake." But I was done talking. Every ounce of sympathy I'd once had for her was gone, drained out by the sight of her betrayal. I wanted her to see just how deep she'd cut me, to know there was no going back, no chance of forgiveness. "Talk? You had months to talk to me," I said coldly. "Instead, you chose to lie, to bring some stranger into our home. This isn't something we can fix, Emma. You broke it, and I'm not sticking around to pick up the pieces." She looked down, defeated, her hand shaking as she picked up a pen and started signing the pages one by one. She didn't argue, didn't try to bargain anymore. She knew, just as I did, that there was no saving this. As she signed the last page, she looked up at me, her face pale, her eyes hollow. "Sam. I'm sorry. But it was too late." I picked up the papers, glanced down at her one last time, and walked out the door, leaving her alone in the empty house she'd turned into a battlefield. When I stepped out that door, it wasn't just my house I was leaving behind, it was a whole life. The air felt colder, sharper, as I walked to my car and tossed the signed divorce papers onto the passenger seat. My chest felt heavy, but there was a sense of relief too, like I'd just cut a weight off that had been dragging me down without me even realizing it. The drive to Tom's office was silent. I'd shut off the radio, not wanting any noise. My mind kept replaying the look on Emma's face when she'd finally realized there was no coming back from this. She'd looked shattered, panicked, and as much as I wanted to feel sorry for her, I just couldn't. I kept thinking about our kids, Josh and Lily, and the mess she'd dragged them into. She wasn't just a stranger to me now, she was a threat to everything I'd built for them. At Tom's office, I handed him the signed papers. "It's done," I said, keeping my voice steady. He nodded, flipping through the pages to check her signature. "Good. I'll file these right away and get everything set in motion. We can discuss custody next." Custody. Just hearing the word made my gut clench. I'd been prepared to share time with her, to let her be in their lives despite everything. But the way she'd acted, the reckless decisions she'd made, it was clear she couldn't be trusted, not even with her own family. I knew this wasn't going to be a clean break, that she'd fight, that she'd want to keep her grip on the kids to make herself feel like she hadn't lost everything. But I was ready for it. "So what now?" I asked, looking at Tom. "Well, given what you've shown me, there's a strong case for you to have primary custody, especially since you're taking quick action," he said, adjusting his glasses as he went through the documents. "Emma's actions and the evidence of her infidelity, it works in your favor, legally speaking. But it's still going to be a fight. She won't give up that easily." "Let her fight," I muttered, clenching my jaw. "She doesn't deserve to have any say after what she's done." Tom gave me a steady look, a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Just be careful. When emotions are high, people do stupid things. Desperate things. The anger you're feeling? She'll be feeling it too, and she might lash out in ways you won't expect. So stay calm. Keep focused on what matters." I knew he was right. The last thing I wanted was for her to somehow twist this and make me look like the bad guy, especially when it came to the kids. I took a deep breath, nodding. "All right. I'll keep it together." After leaving Tom's office, I drove back toward the neighborhood, but I didn't go straight home. Instead, I stopped at my parents' house. It was a modest place, the house I'd grown up in, and I knew that I could count on them now that everything was falling apart. My mom was at the kitchen counter, rolling out dough for one of her pies, humming softly to herself. When she looked up and saw me, her face lit up in a warm smile. Sam. I wasn't expecting you today. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and came over to hug me. The second her arms were around me, I felt a wave of emotions I'd been holding back. Hey, Mom, I managed, hugging her back. She pulled away, frowning slightly as she looked me over. Everything all right? I hadn't planned on telling her right away, but I knew I'd have to explain sooner or later. I sat down at the kitchen table, and after a few moments, she joined me, her expression now tinged with worry. Mom. Emma and I are done. She's been seeing someone else. The words felt like lead leaving my mouth, each one landing with a dull weight. Her face went pale. She put a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Oh, Sam. I'm so sorry. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand details. She just put a comforting hand on my arm and sat with me in silence, letting me feel the weight of what I'd just told her. After a few moments, I spoke up, trying to keep my voice steady. I've already started the process. We signed the divorce papers today. Saying it out loud made it feel real, final. Mom nodded, a sadness settling into her eyes. And the kids? Do they know? Not yet, I admitted, rubbing a hand over my face. But they will soon. I'll have to tell them, and I'll need to make it clear why this is happening. She looked at me, a fierce protectiveness in her expression. You're their father. They'll understand, Sam. And they'll always have us here to support them, no matter what. It was exactly what I needed to hear. With everything spinning out of control, knowing that my parents would stand by me, would be there for Josh and Lily, was an anchor in the storm. We talked for a little while longer, and by the time I left, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I wasn't just doing this for me, I was doing it for the kids, to give them a stable life away from the chaos Emma had chosen. When I finally pulled back into the driveway, I saw her car was gone. Good. It gave me a few minutes to get things ready before she returned. Inside, I went straight to the kids' rooms, collecting a few clothes and essentials they'd need if we left on short notice. I had no idea how she'd react when she got back, but I wasn't taking any chances. It was a couple of hours before she came back, and I heard the front door open and close with a bang. Her footsteps were sharp, angry, as she marched into the living room, her eyes narrowed. She spotted me and wasted no time launching into a tirade. What the hell was that, Sam? You really think you can just waltz in, throw some papers at me, and take my kids? Her voice was tight, her face twisted in rage. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, meeting her glare with a calmness I didn't feel. They're my kids too, Emma. And considering the choices you've made, I think they'll be better off with me. You don't get to make that decision, she snapped, her hands clenched into fists. This isn't just your family. You think you can take everything away from me because of one mistake? Is that what you're calling it now? A mistake? I could feel my anger rising, but I kept my voice steady, refusing to give her the reaction she was clearly hoping for. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something you don't mean. What you did was a betrayal. You brought someone else into our lives, into our home. You think I'm just going to stand by and let that slide? She flinched, her face contorting with guilt and resentment. I was lonely, Sam. You were always working, always too busy. I needed someone. Someone? I repeated, disgusted. You mean you needed someone who didn't have kids, someone who didn't have a family, someone who didn't have any real responsibility? That's what you wanted, right? Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, she looked like she might actually break down. But instead, she steeled herself, lifting her chin defiantly. This isn't all my fault, Sam. You were distant. You stopped caring a long time ago. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Stopped caring? Emma, I was here every single day, taking care of you, of the kids, of this house. The only person who stopped caring was you. You were the one who decided to throw everything away. She took a shaky breath, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew she was losing. she knew there was no going back. So what happens now? You're just going to take them away from me? You think you're the only one who loves them? I shook my head, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. It's not about love, Emma. It's about what's best for them. And right now, that means getting them as far away from this mess as possible. She stood there, silent, the weight of her actions settling heavily on her shoulders. She looked defeated, lost, like a woman who had gambled everything and was only now realizing she'd lost it all. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, the months of deception. And any sympathy I might have felt vanished. I walked past her, grabbing my keys from the counter. I'll be back for the kids tomorrow. Get your things together. This is over. She didn't try to stop me, didn't beg for forgiveness. She just stood there, watching me walk away, a hollow look in her eyes. And as I stepped out of that house for the last time, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. I pulled out of the driveway, watching the house shrink in my rearview mirror. It wasn't easy to leave behind, even after everything. This was the place where I'd raised my kids, where we'd built the illusion of a life together, a safe haven. But now it was tainted, and I needed space from it, space from her. I drove back to my parents' place. They were still in the living room when I arrived, watching TV. I'd called them on the way over to let them know I was coming and asked them not to say anything to Josh and Lily yet. I wanted to handle it myself, carefully, so they wouldn't feel like their world was crashing down in one go. My mom gave me a supportive smile, and my dad clasped my shoulder as I passed by them on the way to the guest room, which was ready for the kids. Josh and Lily were staying with my parents tonight, and it seemed like the right time to bring them into the loop. They deserved the truth, well, at least enough of it to understand why they wouldn't be going back to the house right away. I walked into their room where they were busy setting up a pillow fort, their faces lighting up when they saw me. "Dad!" Josh exclaimed, dropping his pillow and running over to hug me. Lily followed, wrapping her small arms around my waist. "Hey, you two," I said, crouching down so I could look them both in the eyes. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the hardest conversation I'd probably ever have with them. "Listen, there's something I need to talk to you about." I kept my tone calm, soft, but I could feel the weight of every word. "Your mom and we've decided we're not going to live together anymore." Their faces fell, confusion taking over. Josh, always the more serious of the two, looked at me, his brows knitting together. "Are you getting divorced?" I nodded, not wanting to sugarcoat it. "Yes, buddy, we are." Lily's lip trembled, and she looked down, hugging her stuffed unicorn tighter. "Why?" she whispered. I held her close, running my hand over her hair. "It's hard to explain, sweetheart. But sometimes, people just grow apart, and it's nobody's fault. Your mom and I love you both very much, and we're going to be there for you no matter what. But why can't we all stay in the same house?" Josh asked, his voice small, as if he didn't really want the answer. I looked at him, my heart breaking at the innocence in his eyes. "Because, sometimes people change. And when that happens, we have to make choices that are best for everyone. This doesn't mean we won't see each other, though. You'll still have both of us, just in different places." Josh seemed to accept it, but Lily looked up at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Promise?" I nodded, pulling her into a hug. "Promise." After tucking them in, I went back out to the living room. My parents were waiting, a mix of sadness and support on their faces. "They're strong kids, Sam," my dad said. "They'll get through this. And so will you." "I hope so," I said, sinking into the armchair. The exhaustion was settling in now, the toll of the last few days finally catching up to me. I spent the night on my parents' couch, my thoughts running in circles. The relief I'd felt earlier was fading, replaced by the reality of what lay ahead. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Tomorrow, I'd have to go back to the house, see Emma again, and start sorting out the mess she'd left behind. The next morning, I woke up early, getting ready before the kids were even up. My mom handed me a thermos of coffee as I left, her eyes saying what she didn't need to. She was worried, but she trusted I'd do what was best. I drove back to the house, bracing myself for whatever Emma might throw at me. The calm from last night felt distant now, replaced by a grim determination. I needed to get through this, to make sure everything was sorted so I could move on with my life. When I arrived, Emma's car was already in the driveway. I parked next to it, took a deep breath, and headed up to the door. Inside, the house was quiet, almost eerily so, until I heard her footsteps approaching. She walked into the entryway, arms crossed over her chest, her face pale and drawn. She looked at me, her expression guarded, like she was ready for a fight. "I signed the papers," she said, her voice tight. "But I need to talk to you about the kids." "All right," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. She gestured toward the living room, and we both walked in, taking seats on opposite sides of the room. I could see the anger simmering in her eyes, but I wasn't here to indulge her guilt or her resentment. I was here to finalize things and make it clear that this was the end. She took a shaky breath, her fingers twisting together. "I know I messed up, Sam. I know that. But I'm still their mother. And I'm not going to let you take them away from me." I met her gaze, keeping my voice calm. "I'm not trying to take them away, Emma. But I'm also not going to let them be in a home that you turned into, whatever this is. I want them to have stability, not some revolving door of strangers who don't belong in their lives." Her face twisted, a flash of guilt crossing her features before she masked it with anger. "It was one person, Sam. One mistake. You're acting like I've been running a circus here." I shook my head. "One person who you brought into our home, into their home. You didn't just betray me, Emma. You betrayed them, too." She looked away, her jaw tightening. "I don't want to fight about this." "Then don't," I replied, feeling the exhaustion creeping into my voice. "Let's make this easy. We'll share custody, but they'll stay with me most of the time. I don't want them dragged into this mess any more than they have to be." She was quiet for a moment, her face a mix of anger and sadness. "Fine. But I want weekends with them, at least. And holidays." I nodded. "Weekends and holidays. I can agree to that." It was a simple compromise, one that we both knew was necessary, though neither of us was truly satisfied with it. But it was a start, a way to keep things civil for the kids. For the next few hours, we went through the logistics, dividing up our lives into neat, separate piles. She took most of the furniture, and I didn't fight her on it. The kids' stuff, of course, was coming with me. By the time we were done, the house looked half empty, like the shell of something that used to be whole. As I loaded the last of the boxes into my car, I turned back to look at her one final time. She was standing in the doorway, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read, a mix of regret, resentment, and something else I didn't want to analyze. "This didn't have to end like this, you know," she said, her voice soft, almost pleading. "We could have worked through it." I looked at her, my chest tightening with a mix of sadness and anger. "Maybe, if you'd told me the truth. If you'd been honest from the start. But you didn't, Emma. You made a choice, and now we're both paying for it." She looked away, biting her lip. I could tell she wanted to say more, to argue or plead, but she held back. And I didn't give her the chance. I turned and walked away, not looking back as I got into my car. When I arrived back at my parents' house, Josh and Lily ran out to meet me, their faces lighting up when they saw the boxes in the back seat. For them, this was a new adventure, a change they didn't fully understand yet. But I was determined to make it as easy as possible, to give them the stability they needed. That evening, after unpacking some essentials, I sat down with my parents to go over the details of what lay ahead. They were fully behind me, ready to support us in whatever way they could. And knowing I had them in my corner, knowing I had a safe place to rebuild, gave me a strength I hadn't felt in a long time. As the days went on, I focused on settling into this new routine, creating a home for the kids that felt familiar and safe. It was strange at first, navigating this life without Emma, figuring out how to handle the things we'd once shared. But I found a strange peace in the process, a sense of clarity that had been missing for too long. We didn't talk much, Emma and I, except for the bare minimum when it came to the kids. She'd call sometimes, a hint of bitterness in her voice, as if she still believed she'd been wronged somehow. But I kept my distance, focusing on what mattered, Josh and Lily, and the life we were building together. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that there'd be bumps and struggles. But for the first time, I felt free, unburdened by the weight of lies and betrayal. And as I watched my kids playing in the yard, laughing and chasing each other without a care in the world, I knew I'd made the right choice. This was our new beginning, and no matter what lay ahead, I was ready for it.